Okay, it's recording. Hi! So I'm getting more trained in looking at the little itty bitty pinpoint camera because for somebody in my 30s, I'm still the generation used to looking at the screen, being like, working in film and everything. Like you're used to looking at the camera lens, so the screen is sort of like a camera lens, but I'm having to look at like the little dot right next to the camera lens is actually being the little pinpoint camera. So hi. Hopefully I will be looking at you, my audience, instead of the camera lens, because like it's very tiny. It's and I'm still from an age where I remember home phones, what those were, and payphones and such. So even as young as I am, it's still a stretch. Like, oh yeah, there's that little itty bitty dot that I have to look at. So I just wanted to, that aside, I just wanted to address the young ladies who may watch my channel. So I wanted to share a little bit about myself, and like I'm really happy because like I went to Macadam concert last night, and for those of you who don't know Macadam, it's spelled Miqedem, and definitely check them out on YouTube. They are great. Those of you who are older may not like the style quite as much. I mean, not that you wouldn't appreciate it, but just may not quite be up your alley. It's more lively. They do have some more quiet worship songs, but a lot of it is lively for the younger folks, just heads up. But for those of you who are like myself and younger, you may go, this is great, like I could listen to this 24/7. So one of my favorite songs is the Alleluia song, praise God in the sanctuary, praise him in the heavens. Just their style of singing the psalms like this is just amazing. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and I think we're like at the same, not the same point, but very similar points, rather, of how God is drawing us we're at a point where God is drawing us deeper into love with him, in our own journeys with him. And so we're able to identify like, oh yeah, because a lot of this generation, a lot of people in their 20s and 30s now, society, and I've heard great, Girl Defined, if you check out their YouTube channel, they have a lot of good material for the younger folks, and they're probably better at communicating things differently. I'm still learning with some folks how to communicate, but one thing I see a lot of that has been addressed, the issue of perfection, in Girl Defined talks about it, other people have talked about it on their YouTube channels, and people just talking about like the importance to recognize that our culture, in different ways, our worldly society, as coming from a belief of Jesus, from a Christian standpoint, from a messianic Christian standpoint, of we're just inundated with this perfection thing, like finding the perfect mate. And I don't say that I don't say it with condemnation. I say it with like from somebody who has been on that journey, because I had a very my parents had a very difficult relationship, and so there is that yearning. There is a healthy yearning for a godly mate, but that is different than yearning. In my 20s, I gotta be honest, in my 20s, like well, first of all, I had been in school so long, so I was coming from kind of a geek nerd standpoint of not having, not that I was socially inept, but just, I as familiar with all the personalities, with all this stuff. So when I started dating, you know, I was looking for, you know, and not recognizing as much as I do now, that, you know, we are bombarded, especially as women, you know, this yearning for a perfect man. And I gotta tell you, like, we cop out. You know, a lot of us cop out and cave, or, you know, like, buy into society, you know, like, about the perfect man. And, you know, it's become sort of a joke. But, you know, like, the perfect, you know, I've seen it in different forms, like, you know, the perfect man will do this, do that, you know, be this or that or whatever, and, or, you know, showing pictures of what, you know, one thinks the perfect man will be or is. But those are all earthly people who will disappoint you. I'm sorry, but, you know, they will. You know, I've been disappointed way too many times in my life, because and it seems like such a simple little thing. It seems like, you know, when somebody like me talks about that sort of stuff, that a lot of people can be like, oh, you're tripping out over nothing, you know, or whatever. Like, it's not going to harm me, or, you know, it's not, like, it's no big deal. Well, it doesn't start off as a big deal. It really does. It doesn't seem like it starts off. It seems very harmless or whatever. But, you know, we need to be careful. Not, you know, not to walk on eggshells. I'm not talking about, like, oh my gosh, I gotta be careful of this, I gotta be careful of that, you know, because sometimes when people of discernment, like myself, present stuff like that, it can seem like I or somebody like that is telling them to walk on eggshells, like, you gotta be careful and you gotta do this and you gotta, you know, be constantly watching, and, you know, like, that's not what we're talking about. It can sometimes seem that way from the outside, or, you know, from a different perspective, but what we're, you know, people like me, who have the gift of discernment, is their particular gift, you know, are trying to say is, you know, just, like, watch it, you know, because this little thing, you know, can become a big thing. And, you know, so often we say, oh, yeah, you know, yeah, that's your opinion, or that's your perspective, or, you know, like, I understand why you think that, or, you know, it's no big deal, you know, because we're inundated with society instead of Jesus, and, like, at a greater capacity. I should say, as we're inundated with a greater capacity of society rather than the Bible and our love for Jesus. And, you know, it's taken me, like, full confession here, well, maybe not full confession, but, like, confession time here, you know, in my 20s, dude, I was still, like, I was, you know, I could see some of that, but I was still also challenged, you know, because, like, I may not have paid attention so much to memes on the internet like this, but, you know, the message of, like, you know, the perfect man, or, like, I wasn't really in my mind, I wasn't really thinking, like, clearly, like, oh, I am looking for a perfect man. But I wasn't saying that directly, but it was kind of indirect, meaning, like, I was looking for a godly man, but my view of a godly man was skewed. So what do I mean by that? Like, so when I started dating, you know, when I unfortunately gave away my virginity, which is a big deal too. I've heard people on the internet say, like, you know, who are not Christians, say, oh, giving your virginity is no big deal. I say, oh, yes, it is. It is a very big deal. It involves the mind, the emotions, you know, all this stuff, and people don't like to talk about the after effects of giving that away, or, you know, having that taken away if you were raped or whatever. It's a big deal. Don't buy into that lie, because that's a flat out lie. It is a big deal. But, I would look for guys who were, like into ministry and into responsibility, because I did not have that with, I did not have an example like that. So I was like, I want, I want, a godly guy who's into this stuff, but, and it was a challenge. Like, for me, it was a challenge, because in my 20s, some of you, this probably still exists, even if you're in your 20s now. I'm in my 30s or whatever. But when I was dating, my challenge was, as the person that I was like looking at the people looking at the guys that I dated, and I was like, okay, either they, looking for the right person for me. I was like, okay, either they are in the church and they're, I don't want to say too godly, but like too set in the religious standpoint to have an open, creative mind about how God might work differently in alignment with His Word, not out of alignment with His Word, but in alignment. Or they're just way too open-minded and not understanding that things do have to align with His Word. So that, if you're facing that challenge, you're not alone. Like, I went through that. It's very, very hard. And, that's why I appreciate books such as Robin Jones Gunn, Praying for Your Future Husband, whether, written from a standpoint, a very non-judgmental standpoint of whether you are a virgin and waiting for your future husband, or you have had that taken from you, or you gave it away, and you want, to wait for the one that God has perfectly designed for you, who's not perfect. No human will ever be perfect, and we often, the human mindset can be like, oh, well, I know a person isn't perfect, but when we let it, we let in what we let in, and we reject what we reject. We have that ability, capacity, power, whatever word you want to put to it, so that when we are joining ourselves, like, let's say I placed a meme, or a or a statement, a wish, it can take different forms. I've had women friends of mine say, like, oh, a perfect man would do this, or whatever form it's taking. When we we're basically accepting that, and so when you accept that, it begins to grow, because we're nurturers as women. We're, and it happens to men too, but from a woman's standpoint, we are nurturing. I suppose, whatever we let into our hearts, whether we're a man or a woman, we are nurturing that, we're feeding it, we're accepting it. We may think we're rejecting it, we may think we have the power to say, the ability to say, like, oh, I can accept I can post this or say this, on a public forum or whatever, and be able to distinguish it in my mind. But what we don't take into consideration oftentimes is that we are accepting that, whether we say, oh, whatever form, whatever format, because it's out there a lot, it's out there, like, not just on social media, but just in conversation. You may be having a conversation with your girlfriends of, like, oh, my ideal man or my perfect man is this or that. There is no perfect man out there but Jesus. I'm sorry if you don't like that. I'm sorry if that offends you, but it's true. I'm sorry that you may feel a certain way, but it is the truth. and people will disappoint you. Many wise people who have like YouTube channels, I've seen them say this, and I said, I agree. You know, people will disappoint you. So that is why it is so important to recognize that, you know, publicly, like, people will disappoint you, but Jesus won't. And that's part of like giving your testimony as a woman of God, that despite what people do, that Jesus is faithful. And so often we don't do that, because a lot of people, you know, I've read it over the past, I want to say, year and a half. I was reading a book by Elizabeth Alves. If you haven't read her book, I haven't read all the way through it, but I'm trying to finish it up. It's called Becoming a Prayer Warrior, and she was asking God, like, in prayer time, you know, what happened to the church in Acts? Like, when, you know, and a lot of people have asked this, what happened to the church of Acts? Like, you know, people were alive back then, like, their love for the Lord, their zeal, their fire, you know, we've succumbed to the fear of man. And that can take its form in this instance by, like, oh, well, you know, just caving to society, like, you know, I'm gonna look for a perfect man, instead of saying and living out in truth who the perfect man is. You know, and that things go beyond just the flesh. You know, I remember, like, in my 20s, you know, and there's been I want to say there's been a constant like debate, you know, because some people take the school of thought, like, oh, well, you know, you gotta totally discount, you know, the flesh as being attractive, versus, like, how do I say this, like, not discounting the spiritual aspects, but just, like, you know, oh, we're sexual beings. And people are trying, the Christian community is trying to reconcile that and say, you know, yes, Jesus did, you know, God created us to enjoy that physical intimacy as a reflection, in a healthy way, between a man and wife, in the marriage context, to enjoy that and to understand deeper, not just ourselves and what we like, you know, sexually as a human being, but understand, like, the Lord loves our soul like this. The Lord is and it can be scary, like, you know, sometimes I didn't used to think that love could be scary. I really didn't. I thought love was like you know, like the just the perfect expression, and just, like, so great, and, you know, I wanted it. But when I actually had, like, physical love, you know, before I had, sorry, my bunny is chewing the bars on his playpen. But I have a little rabbit. I don't know if I can show you. He's there he is. Hi. So that's my little baby. That's my little fur baby. So, anyways, but back to what I was saying. You know, before I had physical intimacy, like, I'd heard from others who had that, you know, that, yeah, I mean, it was great, but there was something greater, and I still found it hard to believe their word. I was like, you know, because I hadn't experienced it yet. But now, you know, now that I'm on the other side, now that I have had that experience, I'm not downplaying it. I'm not saying, like, oh, sex is horrible, you know, or whatever. But there's so much hype on it that even the young Christian men, the young Christian ladies are thinking, oh, you know, I have to experience this. I have to, like, this is the epitome. And, you know, God did create it to be beautiful. God created it to be a reflection of his love for our souls, you know, and to draw us. He didn't mean it to be a means to an end. He meant it to be an opening of, like, just this awe of, like, wow, this is a beautiful expression. This is, like, he wants to go so much deeper into my soul, you know, not in a sexual sense, but in a spiritual sense. So, sorry about the I still have to get my, stand for the iPad, but, so, basically, there's a lot still, of this battle of the whole perfection thing, because people, it's still going on, and I want to add my 2 cents to the issue. I hope they give some good insight. So we've talked about, like, the physical intimacy, the spiritual intimacy, the just recapping the perfection thing. And even though some people have had either given away their virginity or had it taken away from them, they still cash in or buy into this, you know, perfection thing, like, seemingly harmless. We tell ourselves, like, it's harmless, but coming back to the point, I ramble a lot, so hopefully this video makes sense, because I go around in a loop. I apologize for that. Just be wary, because, like, people have and continue to, warn is a little strong of a word, but address the issue, because it's still ongoing. People are still buying in, they're still cashing into this perfection thing. Even Christians, even believers are, you know, thinking it's harmless, but I've seen how it hurts other people firsthand, in my own life. You know, I've hurt other people by doing this, and I don't want people to have to be like, oh shoot, I hurt another person. People who I'm called to love, people I want to love, you know, and the thing is, perfection, here's the thing, perfection oftentimes before marriage is presented in the light of being the ideal in association with marriage. So I recently listened to some good talks on, like, you know, from women who are younger, well, they may be my age, they may be younger, but the point is they're reaching this next generation, and they're saying, you know, Girl Defined was talking about how, you know, one of them was talking about how she thought, you know, and probably many of you think, like, oh, you know, when I get married, all these problems will disappear, I'll be a completely new person. Now, I don't know, I'd have to reflect if I was of that same mindset, you know, when I was going through stuff, but I do see the truth of that, and what she says, you know, like, I do see the truth in that many people think, like, oh, it's just harmless to say, you know, to idealize on the perfect human man. But what I gotta share with you is, like, that perfection, that little seemingly itty bitty little thing, like, oh, I'll idealize on the perfect man, or, you know, whatever. I was putting, and you may not think you're putting a man on the throne, but really it does. It puts a fleshly man who is prone to err on the throne of your heart. And God, oh man, like, God had to really convict me. I went through a boyfriend then followed by, then that fell through with unfaithfulness, and I was like, just heart wrecked. Like, I was like, dude, I'm never getting with anybody but my soulmate, thinking wrongly. Maybe you're going through something similar or the same thing. But, in my mind, I was like, okay, from the example that I had from my parents, the loyalty ingrained in me, that was another thing. Like, they had issues with their marriage, but they were very, from a generation that honed in on loyalty. And maybe your parents have a great, healthy relationship, maybe they don't, but that generation was, very much about being loyal, and that is a godly, biblical principle. That is the truth. You're supposed to be faithful. But just being loyal for loyalty's sake is not what marriage is about. Marriage is hard work. It is being cut open by the Lord in places that you don't want for healing to happen in order for your marriage to succeed and thrive. Not just succeed, but thrive. Because many people are just loyal and end it there. It takes work. Many marriages are geared toward just self-service, or whatever, but really marriage and the relationship between a man and a woman is geared toward the higher, like, serving God together. And I wanted that, but I wanted that with the wrong person. So, like, I caved in. I thought, I justified things in my mind. I thought I listened to a lie that seemed good. So then I went that path. And then when that path didn't work, big surprise, in hindsight, because some of us, just a little thing with some of us, we all have different personalities. Some personalities, like me, dealt with, some of us, how do I say this, like, have a greater, just a greater overall, like, capacity and desire for love, and that's okay. Not that some of us don't desire love, but just that we, it's expressed differently. But just some of us, like, love to, just have this, are designed with this, like, I want to give love to the world, I want to receive it in greater, in this awesome capacity, and some are, like, more reserved with it, and that's okay. We're all designed differently. However, it has to be in alignment with the word. So I went down a path that was, like, really bad decision, and then I was like, because I wasn't walking close to the Lord, I was like, oh, well, I know that vows are, sacred. I put them in a sacred place in my heart, so I'm gonna promise myself, and a lot of people do this, I'm gonna promise myself to do this, or I'm gonna promise myself to do that. Like, in my mind, I was just stupidly, like, like, okay, this person who I was with, who I fell for a lie, I'm not going to fall for the same lie twice. I'm not going to fall for a lie. I'm going to decide, commit to, resolve to, whatever. I'm not going to be with anybody but my soulmate. Problem is, you don't know who your soulmate is if you're not praying. So I fell down a really bad path, and with, again, the wrong person, the person that God did not have for me, because of my decisions. And I thought, the other side, presented it like in such a spiritual way that I was suckered into believing that lie, and I let myself believe that lie. But, when we're letting ourselves believe a lie, I think that's what I wanted to hone in with the perfection thing, is like, we let ourselves be deceived. And that is something that the Lord has been laying on my heart to work on and to reflect on and to remember. Because having had the path that I have had, it just solidifies in me the importance and wisdom, the beautiful wisdom in not letting, will we get duped in life? Yeah, but let's be more aware, let's be more discerning, because, so often the church, in general, the new, well, not exactly new, but the new thing is to like, don't judge. Well, discernment is a sort of judgment, and we are to use that. The Bible specifically and directly says so. Jesus says, do not let yourselves be deceived. Paul says, do not, like in a little bit different variation of the statement, but the gist is, you can look up, in blueletterbible.org, which is one of my favorite online concordances, like, do not be deceived, and see that Jesus says it, that Paul says it. The gist is, do not let yourselves be deceived. We let ourselves be deceived. So, God is working on my heart, thankfully, just a deeper, having gone through that heartbreak that I don't want anybody to have to go through. I went through it, like, you don't have to. So, nobody has to. So, and I've seen, that on the other end, the other person has had their own hurts, that they haven't healed from, that like, I'm not trying to make them out to be a villain or anything. It's just, I've seen unhealed hurts on the other side, whether it was in, oh dear, it says AE lock. Whoops, what have I done? Okay. I don't know if it cut out there, so I'm sorry. So let me see here. So in not letting ourselves be deceived, there's been, I'm not trying to make other people out to be the villain or anything. I've just seen a lot of the other side, their unhealed hurts, whether it's in family or, the two guys that I was with. Fortunately, I wasn't more, but just, and it's hard to come out and say that, to be vulnerable, but, I want to do that because, like, I know that there are a lot of young women who are suckered into this whole, like, seemingly harmless statement, like, or, idea of the perfect man. Girl, men will disappoint you. Even godly men who are, because they're human. And we may know this in the back of our minds, but what we do mentally as women is just, like, kind of shove it into the back of our minds and, like, forget about it, and then bring forward the ideal, and that, like, we're, like, it's kind of on the back burner, like, oh yeah, like, I know men aren't perfect, I know this, I know that, but our focus is so much on the perfect guy that we want, that we're not seeking, and I come from a standpoint where, like, I'm not trying to be judgmental, I'm not trying to condemn you, I'm saying, like, I know this because I had not such a great example growing up, and God had to be my father, God had to be Abba and teach me what, his fathership was like, versus the human fathership that I knew. Which is very, 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 very different. And, and it is, God's ways are not our ways. And, like, even though we say that, even though we preach it and stuff, we don't meditate on it very often as much as we could or should possibly. So we really are hurting ourselves if, when we don't focus in on the Lord and, like, His wonderfulness, and we're chasing after this ideal man thing, or, like, condoning it, or just accepting the world's view of what our relationship ought to look like. For myself, like, do I have lonely nights? Do I cry? Yeah, I do. There are days when I, want to cry but don't. There are days when I just breathe a sigh and it's just like deep breath in and just like, Lord, help me. Like, because, He's growing me to, not that we ever reach a place of, I've reached the apex of my spiritual maturity, or, whatever like that. Nothing like that. But He's just drawing me, and I was having, like I said, a discussion with my friend, and they were describing, like, just being drawn to a deeper place in love with the Lord, and I feel like He's doing that with me too, and I hope He does that with you, and that's something to be desired, that's something to be prayed for, like, Lord, draw me into a deeper place with You, because I'm looking more, like, back in my 20s, I would hear people older than me say, like, take, and they were coming from a point where I more understand now that, like, but they were coming from a place that I don't exactly agree with, because they were, and do say sometimes, like, kind of like the way that they say things or present, godly relationships being better than the fleshly ones. Well, when you do enter into marriage, you do become one flesh. You don't become one soul, but you do become one flesh. And there is that, you will always, hopefully, love your, spouse and see their flesh through, God's design in God's eyes, how He created them, because a lot of people don't. They cash into this idea of, like, oh, like, trying to think, like, oh, I was in love with you, but I'm not anymore, kind of thing. Youch. Look at your spouse, through the eyes of the Lord, like, they are fearfully and wonderfully made. And, like it or not, even the secular world, you see in movies, like, oftentimes it's the women, but the men too, will say something like, even the secular world recognizes this on a subconscious level. Like, you will grow old. You will have wrinkles, you will sag, you will, have all this stuff going on. But what is going to hold you together is the friendship, and in the godly sense, is going to hold you together to know the Lord and to be able to appreciate not just the flesh, which you should appreciate as a married couple, but the eternal factors in the other person, the beauty of the personality that God created, the strengths that you share that complement each other, because you are not primarily married for the sake, and some, not disclaimer, some people, their ministry is their family. I'm not putting that down, okay? I'm not putting that down, like, that is their ministry, to raise a godly children, to raise them up for the next generation, but not everybody is called the same. And so, like, I just want to include, the people who are, kingdom builders, who may not be building solely their family as a primary kingdom building ministry. Maybe they're to be missionaries. Maybe they never have children. I'm one of these people that is like in my 30s now. I don't know. Maybe God has children in my future, but I was like, right now where I am just like, I don't have the patience for kids. I was like, maybe in my 20s I might have had the energy, but now I'm just like, no thanks, I'm good. And that's okay. Some people are, maybe I'll adopt. I don't know. But, but just, God is drawing me in my walk, and it's not just, we tend to think, oh, well, that's good for you. That's good for you, but that's not for me, and some things may be that way. However, when it comes to the Lord, if you're a believer, I think it shows greater signs of maturity to, and I'm experiencing this myself. I'm like, okay, now I'm looking at, having gone through I want to call it a reckless marriage, or, like based off my own decisions and my own understanding, and lies, and, not just from the other person, but like society, all the stuff that was around me influencing me. So we need to be careful what we put around us to influence, because what we put in will grow. And if we are saying, oh, that it's harmless, I'm able to, put it on the back burner or distinguish things, like we need to watch it when we're at that point, because like lots and lots of young women are doing this. It's not a great fad. It's not a great message. It's going to harm you, even if it doesn't seem harmful right now. What we put in will grow. What we accept, what we water, what we fool ourselves if we think we can just like put something in and nothing will come of it. Something will come of it, whether it's good or bad. And in this case, dealing with perfectionism in of itself is a very interesting topic, because like in the Christian circles, it's emphasized, oh, we're to be perfect like Christ, we're striving to be perfect. But sometimes our perfectionism can turn into legalism, and hurt other people in their walk, or it can hurt us, because we're not realizing that, God doesn't say, or, either we strive for it and then find we can't be and then just stop striving, or we I'm sorry, I had a great thought and I was like, got lost. Or we can do the opposite of just not striving at all, because it seems like too much responsibility. Let's see. Neither one of which are great and healthy. But, God doesn't say, well done, my perfect and whatever servant. He says, well done, my good and faithful servant. But that should not hold us back from striving to be like Jesus, because he was perfect. But to be rather excellence workers, if that makes sense, because perfection, taken in the secular context, can be really harmful. So being an excellence worker is a little bit different. It's that good and faithful servant, is that wanting to do well, knowing that you, in your human flesh have limitations, but you want to do well. You want to do well. It may not be perfect, but you want to do the best that you can, the best that He endows you with. So, as I ramble through these woodlands here, in my brain and in my heart, I'm just wanting to share with you, like, how I've heard in the past, like, from mentors and older people who are wiser than me, like, in some most areas, but just had got kind of hung up on the whole fleshly thing, even though some of them were married. And it interested me. I was like, they're almost wanting to I don't know whether they're doing it for my sake or wanting to, like, presentation wise or whatever, trying to minister to me where I'm at. But married couples should appreciate the person in the flesh that God has given them to each other as co-heirs, not just one over the other. However, I want to say that God is drawing me deeper appreciation of a lesser appreciation. Well, no, that's not right. That doesn't come out right. Let me rephrase that. So, like, before, I was looking at primarily, like, I was looking at, men or guys, like, he's got a killer personality, and he's got a killer spiritual personality, and spiritual, and and he looks good. So I was, like, looking at like, this is an awesome combo. Like, he seems like he's got it together. Like, his personality is great. Like, his spirituality seems to be in check, and, like, he looks good. So, like, considering all the vectors and stuff, but I wasn't really. I was looking, to be honest. I was looking at. I wasn't necessarily saying, like, just honing in on, like, like so many people do, you look so cute together, or, whatever, that, like, junior high-ish kind of thing. But, I was like, that is a fine man. Like, he looks fine. And he did. These men may look fine. But, really, the lasting things are going to be the personality and the spirituality that we don't so often look at. And more, I'm observing and I'm understanding deeper, like, not even spiritual men, even men of good example, which I didn't have in my life. I'm seeing more godly men now. Like, I'll observe them and be like, that is a man after God's own heart. That is beautiful. Even though they may, they're not, like, for me, I'm seeing, like, this is a good example. This is what I'm supposed to be praying for. Like, this, not looking at them as, like, great, a godly man, like, awesome, like, fantasize or, think of them, like, or, like, idolize or idealize that person. Does that make sense? Because, like, it's our tendency to idolize or idealize the other person because we are made in the image of God. So we do have that reflection when we're created, but that doesn't mean that we are a deity. And when we place somebody on the throne of our heart above the Lord, that's a bad place to be. That's a dangerous place to be. And so I know that not everybody has the same struggles, but a lot of people do struggle with this, and a lot of people don't admit that they are doing that. exactly that. They think it's like, they dismiss it, they rationalize it, they justify it as like, oh, this is harmless, you know. No, it's not. It's not. It's really, really harmful. It just takes a long time sometimes. Sometimes it's a short time, but oftentimes it just is like, it's like the song in Samson. I went to see the theater show of Samson at the Sight and Sound Theaters, and the villain, one of the villains, Gaza, in the song, he's singing from the villain's perspective of singing a song from a villain's perspective of like basically wearing down Samson over time. And I was like, ooh, that's right on the dot. That is exactly what the enemy oftentimes tries to do, is not, being subtle, like, with such a blatant statement, and yet, just wearing us down over time, like getting us to accept things and getting us to like not think it's such a big deal, and not realize why it's such a big deal. So I just want to put that out there and just like share the beauty of how God is like showing me godly examples and being like, this is the type of man, you're able to see beauty now that you weren't before. Like, oh, this is, like maybe it's some way that somebody worships the Lord with his whole heart, but he's not the man for me, but I'm just saying, like, because I used to think, oh, jump on this opportunity or this ideal person or whatever, but it's like, God showing me, like, this is the type of heart that I have in mind for you. You haven't met him yet, but, these are the aspects I'm showing you that are lovely to me as creator, and to remember those, and to know that I have that type of person in mind for you. And so I just want to share that with people, with especially the young women out there, that you may be struggling with that. And you know what? I've struggled with it too. You're not alone. You're not alone. But it can be overcome, and you just need to, I hate to say you just need to do this and make it seem simple, because it's a really complex problem. But to start by just faithfully like praying to the Lord. And you know what? It takes a lot. It takes a lot more than people see, but God sees it. Sometimes you just need to like get down on your knees, and it's a battle. It's a spiritual battle, because you want your fleshly desires are to want certain things, and like whether it's fantasizing about a person or fantasizing about an ideal, a human ideal, and just to get down on your knees and be that prayer warrior woman that God is calling you to be. Oh, excuse me, burp. But to really just fight. Don't give up the fight. Ask, have your reliance, and it takes a great, because our flesh wants what our flesh wants, and so it is a very real spiritual battle in prayer to just, surrender all to the Lord and say, like, I want what I want, but I know that you have, or even if you don't know, I want to trust, I want, God, like, I trust that you have the best in mind for me, above what I think is the best for me. And that's hard. A lot of it, in my 20s, I gotta be honest, I was probably not the best at saying that, because we still are maturing, our body, understanding our bodies too, as like, what we're chemically going through, what we are emotionally going through, does help, in specifying our prayers, like, Lord, help me with this, because I'm dealing with this issue from my growing up, or, whatever. Our worldview is shaped by our, the people and the environment that we are raised in and nurtured in or not nurtured in. So just, the Lord does, He wants to hear from you. He will give you the strength. And just, it doesn't come naturally to us as human beings to just, like, get down on their knees and say, I don't have the strength, because we want to think, like, that we have the, if we're really honest with ourselves, a lot, we all deal with this in some way, form, or shape. Like, I have the strength, I have the ability, I have the capability, because God gives it to you, but you gotta get in the source first. So, with that said, at 55 minutes now, I've talked for an hour on this. Wow, it's a big topic. So hopefully this was helpful. It was uncut, raw, basically. I didn't want to, edit this. I just wanted to, like, share with you what was on my heart. So I pray that the Lord, draw you as a young woman, or, a young man too. If you are struggling with this, I, as a woman, personally talk to younger women and mentor them. But, as a young woman, not to just count young men, find a mentor, pray, and ask God to lead you to the mentor for you, that God has for you, to teach you the things that need to be taught, that need to be learned, so that you can be an effective believer for Christ, effective kingdom builder, a blessing on others. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. And as if you're a young woman, like, I hope this helps you. I hope this is an encouragement to you to not go the direction that I went. Okay. Uh-oh.